ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It is your boy Ernie, the Blerd Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. We are in week 8 of X-Men Age of Revelation, and some of these titles are crawling their way up into a higher station than what I originally had kind of placed them at. Some of them, not all of them. And that said, we are going to be talking about X-Vengers number 2, Undeadpool number 2, X-Patriot X-Men number 2, and Cloak or Dagger number 2. Now, before we dive all the way in, just real quick, I want to make sure, because it's always someone's first video, I normally like to take these titles and break these down in terms of 3 key categories: essential, kind essential, not essential. With essential being a title that I feel you need to read in order to get the full understanding of the crossover event in question, in this case, X-Men Age of Revelation. With kind essential being a title that has little breadcrumbs and little nuggets of, story arc that might actually pay some dividends down the road, but is difficult to tell at this particular point in time. And then not essential being exactly that. This is a title that, while it may be good, it may be a fun read, it's not mandatory for you to read in order to get the full understanding of Age of Revelation. Now, let's talk about it. So let's start with X-Vengers. We basically find ourselves in the wake of the death of Scott Lang, who died as a direct result of the Technarch overgrowth that cropped up in the previous issue. And in this issue, we're seeing the fallout of the Avengers as well as Revelation's Seraphim having a meeting of minds, and ultimately what kind of devolves into a New Mutants reunion, considering the fact that both Danny Moonstar and Cannonball are serving on the Avengers currently, and then you've also got characters like Sunspot and the Revelation, the artist formerly known as Cypher, all of these like original founding members of the New Mutants, and here they are on opposite sides of the fence. And even to a point where Danny is trying to appeal to Revelation's, old morality, his old sensibilities, which I'm gonna go to right now, doesn't work. And it's actually really good to see how Revelation interacts with people who he once called friends. I mean, we've seen this in some other areas, but none quite like with this series right here, where we're seeing characters who Doug literally came up out the mud with. And here he is right now, not wanting to hear really anything they have to say. I mean, yeah, he's gonna listen, but he's not going to hear any of it. And he's still gonna be on his Revelation bullshit, to the point that he kind of tries to play as if he doesn't know what's going on with the technovirus overgrowth that's been cropping up. He pretends as if he has no idea or that it has nothing to do with him. But there are some telltale signs that pop up in this issue while Revelation is talking. You could almost call them sleight of hands that he's doing, where it seems like he's touching something and suddenly things are happening. This is one of those areas where, under normal circumstances, when I have these, theories and ideas of things that are going on in certain comics, a lot of times people say, man, Blerd, you're overthinking it. And while every once in a while, I think I am overthinking some things, and I even freely admit that, a lot of times I usually tend to be right. Not every time, but more often than not. And in this one, I'm actually almost willing to kind of think, maybe I am overthinking this particular part of it. But there's a portion of this book where right before the technovirus overgrowth starts to kick into high gear, we see Revelation do a little slight touching of the plant life around him. Now, one thing I want you guys to remember is that now Doug can speak to everything. He can literally command the ground, the earth around him, the vegetation around him to act as he sees fit because of the upgrade to his powers, no longer just being about being able to understand any language and speak any language. No, he can now command anything, any living thing, to obey his will. Part of me wonders if this little moment right here is a throwback to the Powers of 10 series. Some of you may remember when Doug first stepped on the island of Krakoa during the House of X era. He gently touched the flowers and had basically discharged Warlock from his body, like a portion of Warlock from him, to basically infect the vegetation of Krakoa around him. it's part of the reason why Doug was so friendly with Krakoa. And there was a lot more to it than him just like infecting the island or whatever. It was a lot more than that. That's just for simplicity's sake right now. We see him do something very similar here. He's not discharging anything. We don't see him actually like removing any part of Warlock, or which I want to be clear here, we haven't even seen much of Warlock since this whole thing kicked off. But we notice that almost immediately after he does that, and then he has this glowing eye thing pop off, suddenly the Technarch overgrowth is back. Where you see smoke, there's very likely fire. And he kind of uses this as a means to manufacture consent so that he can ultimately take Vision off the table, because one of the things that you may or may not have noticed is that Vision, in this new era in the Age of Revelation, Vision has been overtaken by the techno-organic virus, and he is kind of in communication with it. And Revelation uses Vision as a sounding board to use his power to command the overgrowth to basically disperse. But in doing so, kills Vision. That said, it's not the only casualty that happens this issue, but it is one of the more high-profile ones, because the other characters who die in this, they're not characters you would know by name. In the wake of all this, Revelation is doing a huge misdirect to try and get the Avengers to pay more attention to the President of the United States, Sam Wilson, Captain America. Now, whether or not Sam is actually culpable in this, I think is debatable. We don't know anything. We really have not even seen Sam Wilson in this series. We have only seen him mentioned twice across both issues, and it's always just in passing. And with here being a little bit more direct, so we'll see. I kind of hope Sam isn't the one that's behind this, because it would just be too weird. But at that end, I feel like Revelation, he is the bad guy. I'm pretty sure he is the one who is behind this. Revelation was more than big and bad enough to let 3K take the fall for the whole X-Virus shenanigans, even though he was the one who actually unleashed the virus, and he is the only person who really has any access to the Technarchs or the techno-organic virus on any meaningful level. So yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this, but one thing I can definitely say, with all the shenanigans going on in this book, with direct involvement of Revelation in this, the previous time out, I said that X-Avengers #1 was kind of central reading. Right now, I kind of feel like I have to bump that up a taste, based on my own metrics, to essential reading. The fact that Revelation is directly involved in the proceedings, he actually is having character development that you would not get in really most of, if not any of these other titles. Yeah, you almost kind of have to give it to X-Avengers on this title, which, I'm not gonna lie, the nastiest of nasty work titles out there, X-Avengers. Oh my god, I don't even like saying it, and I'm glad that that's not actually their name. But yeah, this book, it literally went from being a book I did not give two shits about to being a book that, I mean, while I am not just like absolutely positively like over the moon about this title, I look at it with a lot higher regard than I used to. Next up is Undeadpool #2. Now, with Undeadpool, we get a little bit more story development in regards to both Deadpool and Cable this issue. With Deadpool, something that was introduced was that, well, yes, he has the X-Virus, it's mutated his healing factor, and basically turned him into a flesh-eating Marvel zombie for the most part, but it's not an all-the-time thing. We're still getting dialogue from Wade Wilson. It's just that when he's in full-on zombie mode, he doesn't really talk, but he does have an inner monologue that is talking a mile a minute the entire issue. Well, this one, we kind of get a little bit more of an explainer as to why he is the way he is now. We know, obviously, yes, it's the X-Virus, and yes, it's mutated his healing factor, but there's some more rules to it than that. Apparently, he gains control of himself once he's built up enough life energy, basically from eating other people. But once he starts to use that energy up, that is when the Marvel zombie version of himself comes into full play. And all of this kind of falls into play around a new character introduced by the name of Fearless, a woman who is a telepath, and this is directly a result of the X-Virus. We get to learn a little bit more about her character, as well as all her friends that Deadpool basically murked and ate in the previous issue. We learned that they were a part of a program, one that Revelation actually had in play, which is really kind of interesting considering how Revelation felt about the title of X-Men, yet it seemed like he was trying to raise a new crop of X-Men, even calling them X-Men, despite the fact that the term X-Man is considered a badge of dishonor to Revelation these days. So I'd be really curious to know what changed in between and there. Like, what was the actual disruption point that caused him to take such a hard shift on his feelings about that term. But that's another story altogether. The whole thing here is we get to see Fearless and Deadpool making a trek across the country, almost kind of Last of Us style, with Deadpool being the Joel in this situation and Fearless being the Ellie in this situation. And all of this kind of comes to a head when encountering a group of Babels, for those who don't know, people who Revelation has completely removed their ability to speak language as well as comprehend language. And it kind of turns them rabid in a lot of respects. We've seen this in other titles like Sinister's 6. Well, when encountering a group of Babels, Cable, who we saw at the end of the previous issue, pulls up. But there's something wrong with Cable, and I'm not just talking about him having been almost completely overtaken by the techno-organic virus. No, there's something else wrong with him here as well. He doesn't have any memory of who Deadpool is. As a matter of fact, Cable seems stuck in a very specific time frame, and about roughly like 96, maybe 1995, 1996 era Cable, where he's talking about his son from the future, Tolliver. Who remembers Tolliver? Yeah, wait. He's remembering Tolliver and how Deadpool once worked for him, and he's also having very specific memories of Deadpool being a merciless killer. It's not really jiving with the memories that you would imagine Cable should have about Deadpool. Yes, he should find Deadpool as annoying as he does in this issue, but the fact that he's acting as if he doesn't know Deadpool very well, it should be very telling, and I'm pretty sure it has a lot more to do with the techno-organic virus that is taking him over. As we have known Cable for the longest of time, he's been using his telekinesis in order to hold the techno-organic virus back. But here, he's not doing that, it seems. The techno-organic virus has taken over pretty much roughly half his body. He's also talking in more of a technarch sort of way, referring to his own person as self, and speaking third person, and also talking in binary. It is also a dead-ass giveaway. But there's something else going on here, and I really wonder what it is, but we do not get the answer to it here. Though we do learn that, yes, the techno-organic virus is directly responsible for how he is acting. The fact that once he and Deadpool get into it, have their little fight, and Fearless does get involved, and we do discover that she does actually have a secondary mutation, that she didn't think that she had any telekinetic powers before. She knew she had telepathic abilities, but now we know she does actually have telekinesis, and she uses it against Cable, knocking him on his ass, forcing him to run away. But ultimately, when he does get away, we discover he does actually remember Deadpool, now that he seems to have a little bit more control over himself. So the question becomes, what is up here? Is this the very same techno-organic virus that Cable has been fighting off since he was a child? Or is this something else? Because once again, as I spoke about just previously with X-Vengers, we haven't seen Warlock anywhere. Warlock has been MIA since the X-Men Age of Revelation 0 issue. And yeah, we haven't seen him since. We don't know where he's at. And we also know that Bay the Blood Moon ran off. That was another one of Revelation's disciples, his own wife, mind you, and his own best friend Warlock is in the wind. We don't know what's going on with him. And it makes one wonder if this is Warlock involved. But once again, I don't think we're going to get that answer. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Warlock showed his face somewhere else. Maybe even in X-Vengers. Now, with the previous issue of Undeadpool, I said this was a kind essential book. I'm going to keep that same energy. I'm going to say this is kind essential, though I will add a caveat on this. One thing I like about this particular week, even though I really hate how many tie-ins this whole series has, one thing I will say I do appreciate that at least some of these tie-ins do seem to tie into each other on some level. We get a little bit of a tie-in to Expatriate X-Men and what's going on over there, and even a little bit of a tease of some things that will come up in that next issue, which we're about to talk about. Things regarding how Deadpool betrayed the Expatriate X-Men. So in that regard, you could actually make a case for this book being essential reading on some level, though I think it's only really essential reading in regards to if you're reading, very specific other tie-ins. So that's why I'm gonna keep this at kind essential and not upgraded to essential, if that makes any sense. Speaking of Expatriate X-Men, let's talk about Expatriate X-Men number 2. So Expatriate X-Men number 2 gives us a little bit more of what's going on the flotilla. We get to see where Colossus is and all this. Colossus is looking pretty beat to hell and back. Like, he looks like he has had the sonic rings beat out of him and he has just been laid up. He's having to take medication now in order to keep himself alive. He also, his body just looks ravaged even when he's in his metallic form. He just looks rough. He's also missing an arm, or at the very least, he has his left arm, but it's replaced with some kind of a cybernetic one. And it's not something that came standard, with the purchase. But this also could potentially be X-Virus related in some way, because as we've seen, a lot of mutants who, once again, they're already mutants. What is the X-Virus gonna do to you other than just give you more powers? Well, we have seen some people be mutated even further because of the X-Virus. So that could very likely be what's going on here. But one of the things I thought was very interesting is how we get to see a little bit more about how this ship is not it's not the good ship Lollipop like you want to think it is. This is a bit rougher of a scenario. As I talked about previously, Kamala Khan kind of seems to be not the same cheery person she usually would be. That has kind of been left to Bronze. And even Bronze is not as cheery as Bronze normally would be. These kids, which they're no longer kids, mind you, these are grown adults now. They have seen some shit. And they're not the same people that we might want to remember them as. From the Exceptional X-Men series. So there's that. But then we also have to look at how the whole situation with Lyrebird, where Lyrebird is in a weird place, where this is a character who kind of seems to be clapping up Melee's cheeks, but also is hiding things about his powers, and come to find out he has even more powers than what was initially stated. He actually, Lyrebird is kind of almost kind of a misnomer. He's actually more of a Firebird than he is anything else, able to summon like an inferno-like form around himself. And that ends up coming up in an interaction with Shinobi Shaw, a character I was like, wow, we are bringing back Shinobi Shaw in this economy? Okay, let's go. Because Shinobi Shaw rarely ever gets any love. And I thought it was interesting that you had two characters interacting in this issue, both Melee and Shaw, who have very similar powers in a lot of regards, but coming from different angles, if that makes any sense. You got Melee, who can phase through solid matter no differently than Kitty Pryde and also turn herself invisible. And Shinobi Shaw can also do the exact same thing, minus the invisibility. But in the case of Shinobi Shaw, he can also change his density to make himself more than just his normal level of impassibility. But typically, Shaw uses the power to phase through solid matter as opposed to making himself tougher, is kind of where the difference in their powers come into play. All of that aside, there's something going on here, and it's that Melee was keeping secrets. Now, those secrets are laid bare in this issue, but they never really get fully sussed out. It really all comes up in the aftermath of Melee and Kamala Khan having it out about a decision being made in regards to what to do about Lyrebird and where they're going to go next. And long story short, Lyrebird ends up going overboard and Kamala Khan tries to go after him. But in doing so, Kamala Khan ends up discovering that Melee has been hiding something from them. Melee was really worried about the fact that Kamala Khan was diving into the water to go after Lyrebird, not because she didn't want Lyrebird to be saved, but because she didn't want Kamala to see what was under the boats. And what's under the boats is 3K tech. Now, here's the thing you gotta take into consideration, is that at this particular point in time, not only was 3K the big bad boogeyman mutant bad guys of the X-Men from the Ashes era, even though they really didn't accomplish a whole heap of a lot in the time between now and then, at least in terms of the time between the From the Ashes era starting and the start of the Age of Revelation, but that's another story altogether. But they were the big bad boogeymen of the Age of Revelation because they were the ones who were thought to be responsible for the release of the X virus, but we know that is not exactly true. It was, in fact, Revelation. This is something we've talked about ad nauseum, I feel like. Well, Melee doesn't get to answer for any of that, and she doesn't get to answer for who she's been in contact with, which now makes me think she has been in touch with 3K, because we've been told that 3K kind of went to ground and they haven't been seen or heard from. Something tells me that that's who Melee was talking to in secret at the end of the previous issue. But we don't get to find out what's going on there, because before Melee can answer for what she has done, they end up running afoul of Darkchild. More specifically, Darkchild's minions, because now they are in the Limbo Lands. Darkchild herself does not actually show up here, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna see a little bit of her. Now, the question becomes whether or not there is going to be any crossover here with the Amazing X-Men, because as we know, in the previous issue of Amazing X-Men, Darkchild had run into them, and she has thrown in her lot with them and is going to help them in their fight against Revelation, or at the very least help them get where they need to go. Now, I'm still kind of wishy-washy on this title, because while last time I said it was kind of essential, this time I almost want to say it's essential, because it seems like it's starting to drag the Expatriate X-Men into the Amazing X-Men's orbit, maybe possibly, but once again, we haven't actually seen that play out yet, so I can't just say willy-nilly that it is doing the thing that we don't know that it's doing, because once again, we don't know what it is doing. And there's also the extra added nugget of the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Undeadpool directly references Expatriate X-Men, and this issue directly references Undeadpool, and it seems like we're also going to be getting some answers about how and why Deadpool betrayed the Expatriate X-Men, largely because he probably ate someone. There's also a mention that Axo is not around, though the way Bronze talks about him, she talks about him almost as if he's just not there, as opposed to him being dead, but maybe he is dead, and maybe Deadpool is the reason why. Once again, these books are kind of playing off each other, and I kind of want to boost this up a little bit, but at the same time, I'm going to need to see just a little bit more, so I'm going to keep Expatriate X-Men at kind of essential, because it is dragging the Expatriate X-Men into the main story a little bit, even if it's not directly into Revelation's orbit. It almost kind of seems like they're going more in the direction of Amazing X-Men. So, whatever the case is, it's also seeming like it's playing off of some other stuff that's going on. So like I said, I kind of want to put it in the in that spectrum. Maybe. We'll see. Next up is going to be Cloak or Dagger #2. This issue is a really fun one because we get to see the Fenris twins go 2-on-1 against Cloak this issue. And one of the things, if you were not keeping up, if this is your first hearing about the Cloak or Dagger series, what makes Cloak or Dagger different than a Cloak and Dagger series that you would normally read is that in the Age of Revelation, something happened to Cloak and Dagger, and largely as a direct result of the X virus, that mutated their light and dark force abilities and made it to where they cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And even more so, they can't even occupy the same plane of existence anymore, which is why the title is called Cloak or Dagger. Kind of a nod to Marvel Rivals, how you can only play as either Cloak or Dagger when you choose those characters. You can't have them both out at once. And in the midst of all this, we actually get to see a little bit more of the fruits of their labor in the times before the X virus had fully taken hold of them. We know that Cloak and Dagger had a child together in the Age of Revelation named Ayla, and Ayla doesn't necessarily seem to have any special abilities, at least not at first. There might be something else, there might be something more going on there that we don't know about. But I'm gonna go on a limb and say, just, without, pontificating and dancing around it, it does seem like by the time we get to the end of the issue, because while he's getting in some good shots on the Fenris twins, the thing is, the Fenris twins have a sort of power that Cloak can't contend with. In the past, we have seen Cloak take damage from certain sources that seem to hurt him a little bit more than others might, and it may be that the Fenris twins have gotten a power boost. It's difficult to say, but Cloak has to take them on solo dolo because Dagger can't be there. Dagger probably would have been the better choice to go against them. Her power, I don't think, would make her any weaker to the Fenris twins than what Cloak seems to be at this moment. But ultimately, the Fenris twins, as we saw in the previous issue, they're trying to turn more humans into mutants. And in this particular point, where Cloak and Dagger are trying to build a safe haven for everybody, you can see where this might be a problem. Not to mention, the Fenris twins are whole Nazis, so that's also a thing for those that are not familiar with the two characters. By the time you get to the end of this issue, when Cloak is literally about to get his ticket punched, it seems Ayla is aware of what's going on. Granted, some of it is probably because she's witnessing the very same powers that are hurting Cloak, they're hurting Dagger, while she's in the in-between place, this in-between realm that they're occupying when one is in the prime material plane and the other isn't. This is where they've been keeping Ayla. And when we get to the end of this issue, we see that Ayla, while she's stuck in this place with her mother, it's not Dagger who initiates the teleportation that gets both Dagger and Ayla to the aid of Cloak. It seems to be Ayla, which makes me wonder if the coupling of Cloak and Dagger created a child who can wield potentially both of their abilities. We see that the aura around Dagger in that moment is light, as you would expect, because that's her power. She controls light force energy. Well, Ayla taps into what seems to be dark force energy. Maybe, possibly. And we see Ayla just pull up, and I also love that Teddy Bear has a miniature version of Cloak's cloak. I thought that was a cute touch. But yeah, it seems like Ayla might just have the best of both worlds. She might have both of their abilities. Now, that said, I've enjoyed this book. I think it might be one of the most fun tie-ins that has popped up in the series. That said, it's not an essential reading book, which it pains me to say, because whenever I say that, people act as if I don't like it. No, I like it. I love this. It's a really good book. It makes it even more painful that there's not a mainline Cloak and Dagger series out on the market right now, separate of Age of Revelation. And I feel like maybe Marvel felt that the best way to do a Cloak and Dagger right now was to tie it to Age of Revelation. We know that Marvel does shit like that. I've talked about this in regards to the Weapon X-Men series. How when I was talking to Joe Casey about it and asking him, hey, it's got One World Under Doom up at the top of this, so how does this tie into One World Under Doom? And Joe Casey, the writer of the series, one of the co-creators of Ben 10 himself, literally looked me dead ass in the eye and said, it ain't got shit to do with One World Under Doom. They just put that up there so, to help sell the book. And that's what Marvel does sometimes. I feel like this is one of those titles that, under normal circumstances, just would have been a regular title. It wouldn't have drugged this into Age of Revelation, because it doesn't really have, outside of the X-Virus, doesn't really have much, if anything, to do with everything else that's going on. And that sucks, because I feel like you could have sold this title without having to tie it to this. And like, I would have read this book regardless of whether it had X-Men slapped somewhere on the side of the spine of the book. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. But that said, I still recommend it because it's good. Especially if you're especially if you're like a Cloak and Dagger fan like myself, like old school, diehard Cloak and Dagger fan. Like, I was Cloak and Dagger Hive before Cloak and Dagger Hive was a possibility of being a thing. And I love this title. But yeah, I tell you what I do wish. I hope that once this is done, I actually hope that they give Justina Ireland the nod to maybe write a actual core Cloak and Dagger series once all this is done. I hope that's the case, because she clearly has a handle on it. And maybe if they actually let her write it without tying it to some bullshit, maybe we might have a ball game. Maybe. Anyway, that's everything with X-Men Age of Revelation this week. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, because it helps the channel out tremendously. Also, if you're watching this on mobile, hit that hype button, and it'll help me out in the algorithm, because views honestly are down across the board on YouTube. A lot of people, bigger channels than even myself, have been suffering lower viewership, and it's kind of because of this new hype feature, because some people are using it, some people aren't using it, and like I said, just all I'm saying is, if you really want to help the channel out, that is yet another way to do it. You can hit the like button and the hype button at the same time. It's not an either or scenario. Both help me out tremendously. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on videos just like this one. Anyway, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this video. And let me know what you thought about X-Men Age of Revelation down in the comments below. Keep it plus ultra till next time. We out of here. Peace out.